Hey there, hi, this is Sumit from Incentivate. Welcome to Incentivate Talks. Today we have Ryan Farber. Ryan has been working in the space of sales compensation for some time. We are absolutely glad to have him here today to speak on a very important topic in regards to pricing. Before we jump into the actual topic, I would love to have Ryan speak a bit about his experience, and from there I'll take it ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the intro. Really appreciate you having me today. So, I've been doing sales comp work for just about 15 years or so, generally with escalating responsibilities along the way. I started like everybody else who comes on all these podcasts. You just kind of fall into sales comp on accident, so we don't need to go into that type of story. But I've worked with, I think my initial team was about 10 to 12 sales heads. My last full-time role in-house, we had about 2,500 plus sales heads. I had a
That's
team
nice.
of 7 below me, and then today I'm doing consulting work at Alvarez and Marsal, which is more known as a restructuring firm, but they're really trying to grow their commercial practice, and sales incentives is a big part of that. So that's where I am today.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot for the intro, Ryan. The reason I want to have like a conversation with you today is about a specific topic, which is pricing.
Mhm.
Pricing plays a very important role when it comes to any organization who is out there running their business. Uh, Pricing, selling, how do we link it with incentives? What are the pitfalls? What are the success stories or positive outcomes? I would love to speak about those. So let's speak about your experience when it comes to pricing.
Sure. So, I guess kind of if I rewind a bit, maybe this will only be for an American-based audience, so I apologize to anyone outside the U.S. in advance. But there is a TV show I watched growing up. It's probably still on the air. The Price is Right. The great host Bob Barker, love him so much. He was the king of summertime sick days, whether the sick days were real or faked as a kid, right, to stay home from school. But famous for the shows, kind of the entrance to get on the show. There's 4 contestants that
Hmm.
have to bid on an item. Call it an oven, call it a cleaning supply. It didn't really matter. It was just kind of a smaller dollar item in nature. Point is to not go over on the bid. So everybody would kind of throw out their bids, 100, 200, 500, $1,000, whatever the numbers were. The last
Hmm.
bid, almost always, the famous bid, $1, Bob. And that bid actually rarely won in the grand scheme of things, but people thought it was a genius strategy. We don't need to go into why it's not a good strategy. But it was just something that I didn't really think about until I got into sales comp work. And then I realized when it came to pricing, every single sales rep that I have encountered, for the most part, takes a price is right approach to pricing. Just get out, get the lowest price, and close the deal. And everybody seems happy at that. And that is definitely not the best way to be running a business, right? In a race to the bottom, the lowest price possible, there are a lot of pitfalls with that strategy. So the price is right strategy is definitely a no bueno strategy for the sales team.
So one thing, I'm pretty sure it's not only about the audience in the US. Even we have seen that show
Oh, great, great. I'm glad
outside
you
the
asked. It's a
US.
great show.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We have seen the show. We have seen the Indian version of the show. Having been born and brought up in India, I have seen it several times. Both the US version and the Indian version of it. So I completely agree. One thing that you spoke about is that this is not the right strategy. So let's speak about strategies. Uh, what are different pricing strategies? If
Sure.
you could just throw a bit more light on different types of premium pricing strategies, I would love to hear a bit about those, and then probably speak a bit about what would be the best strategy for an organization.
Sure, I guess so. Before we go into the ideal strategies, I think maybe we should define pricing real quick, right? So there's kind
Yeah.
of a straight dictionary definition. There's actually 2 of them, and they're both fantastic, right? The first one is just the amount of money expected, required, or
Yeah.
given in a payment for something.
Yeah.
A very, very standard. The other one, which you don't necessarily think about, but is very applicable here, is it's an unwelcome experience, event, or action involved as a condition of achieving a desired end, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that perfectly describes price. It's like, oh god, now we got to talk about price here. Now the negotiating begins, right? Like you're paying a cost to get something, right? This is not easy at the end of the day. I want to preface that up front. Pricing is probably the most challenging thing in a sales organization, probably in the greater organization as a whole, right? How do you increase pricing over time? It's a great discussion. But the strategies that are involved, there's really a whole bunch out there. The first one I've encountered is really I'll call it the it feels good price. CEO, head of sales, head of finance says, we want to price our product at $10 a seat, right? Whatever it is. And how did you get there? Well, it just feels right. 8 feels a little too low. 15 might feel a little too high. Let's start with 10, right? The feel good strategy is already bad, right? There's no research, there's no data. It's just a feeling, which, hey, humans are feeling driven. That's the only positive to that situation. So you might find people who feel the same way, but it might not be a large enough market for you to
Yeah.
sell your product or service into. So feels good. Most
It,
common.
it basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically a strategy to evoke a positive emotional response from the buyer.
Yes, it's just, oh, that looks good, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do I peg that? Mostly based on heuristics.
Yes.
We'll kind of go into other pricing strategies and why that may or may not work. But kind of
Yeah.
another one is the freemium. I think this is most common in the SaaS world. Give something away for free, and then for the most part, you give them kind of the premium services later on, which is actually a very good model for a lot of
Yeah.
businesses specifically.
Keep on nudging them. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, if you can get access to something for free pretty easily, think it's very
Yeah.
accessible on the internet. It's very hard to charge premiums right up front, especially when you can compare pricing across the board.
Yes.
This is an excellent model for you to differentiate yourself, right? Maybe you offer more bells and whistles in your product. Maybe your service has 24-hour coverage. There are certain guarantees that you can put in place, right? There are things that you can do to say, hey, this is where we're different, right? Maybe we sell a borderline commodity here, but we'll price it accordingly and then upsell on special things around the edges, right? So freemium is actually a very
Yeah.
good model for a lot of software businesses these days.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Another one is very common. Most people just think of when you're doing sales incentive work, it's cost plus pricing. Like, hey, it cost me $10 to sell this product. Let's sell it for 15 and just pay the sales rep 10%, right? Like everything's flat, everything's consistent.
Yeah.
Hey, that sounds pretty easy. A question is, well, what if you become very efficient in what you do and you get your cost structure down? Are you now going to reduce your prices to just reflect that same, like, you've become a better business and you're passing that all along to the customer, which in theory sounds really good, but you can't deliver as good of services all of a sudden. You're razor thin. You're just giving up profit margin that you could be investing in the company to help grow the business, right? Whether it's brand and
Exactly.
sales services, could be IT infrastructure, could be just customer support, right? Like you need profits to do these things at the end of the day, right? So kind of cost plus, I actually think is probably the worst one out there. I will argue if everybody's familiar with Costco, they sell everything at a 10% markup except for their store branded stuff. That's 15%. They are just razor good at their margins are razor thin, and they are extremely good at what they do at the end of the day. Everybody loves Costco, right? So there are models that are successful here, but it's not an optimal model for the vast majority of businesses out there.
Absolutely.
The one I think, and you actually might disagree with me on this, and there's a lot of people that this is more of the hot topic one, is value-based pricing. And I don't know if we can cuss on here, so I'm not going to cuss today. But what the heck does value-based pricing even mean, right? I've seen tons of services out there saying, hey, if you pay $10,000 for our service, it's basically the equivalent of saving $100,000 because X, Y, and Z. Like, how do you even prove this stuff, right? There are so many moving pieces in a business, right? Like how departments interact with each other, how they work with their customers. You don't the cost to serve a customer from company to company in the same industry can vastly differ, right? Because people just offer different types of services, even though they sound pretty much the same. How do you even determine the pricing? And then who decides it's 10x the value? Why don't you do it at 5x the value? Why not do it at 20x? Like all the,
Yeah.
it's really silly when you really step out away and think about it. But it is an approach a lot of companies use, and I don't think it's as effective as they think it is. Mostly in the buyer situation, so not the seller, but the buyer side, they're not going to their internal bosses and saying, hey, we got to buy this software service or this industrial packaging because hey, it's going to 10x our business. Like, then that person internally is going to ask, well, how did you get that 10x number, right? Like, it's just it sounds nice, but there's really very little way to prove it at the end of the day. And value-based pricing, that's why I think it's pretty ineffective, even though on the surface it actually looks pretty good, right? And there are some businesses that can get close to doing it, right? Hey, if you insert this technology into your business, right, you can get rid of one head, right? Like just think self
Mm-hmm.
checkout at a grocery store, right? You don't have to hire that
Yeah.
one head anymore, right? That has its own pitfalls for different reasons, but that's a little bit easier to quantify. But most services are not like that, right? So I think value based pricing is a little bit overrated. Kind of the last two, just to wrap it up. One, this is too many businesses do this, is pegged to the competitor, right? Well, I
Right.
sell cell phones, right? I'm gonna go see what Apple's doing. I'm gonna go see what Samsung's doing, and I'm gonna be either a little bit higher or a little bit lower, and I'll angle my marketing and branding accordingly. And that's a terrible idea. Again, internally, you don't know their cost structures, right? This is a little bit related to the feel good. Well, like the other prices, the customers seem to feel good about that pricing, so I can't be too far off from that price. Now, unless you're in like a truly commodified market, think like oil, right? Pork bellies, frozen concentrate, orange juice, for those that have seen Trading Places. Great movie, by the way. These are things that are on the market. They trade all the time, right? You know the price of these things, right? There are things that are still fairly common. Think of cell phone, but you don't really know, Dave, because you don't buy them all the time, right? So you're
Yeah.
pegging it to your
Exactly.
heuristics. So looking at your competitors really just forces you to think, hey, there's probably a better way for me to do this internally. So I think peg to the customers is probably, or peg to competitors, excuse me, is probably the worst one out there because it just, I don't know how to run a business. I'm just going to do what everybody else is doing, right? You're already trying to
Yeah.
be average. The last one, this is the best one. So save the best for last here. It's called the willingness to pay strategy. And there's a lot of research that needs to be done before you even price in these situations. There's kind of questions that you can ask. There's a few different models of the willingness to pay, but it basically helps you find out what your market is actually willing to pay, and there's usually a very wide range in it. I use car buying as an example, right? You go into a dealership and you really want a white SUV. It doesn't really matter what it is,
Yeah.
but when you go into the dealership, you don't tell the car salesman, "Hey, if you have it in white, I'll pay you $1,000 extra." You go and you say, "Hey, I like your car, but I really want it in white, and if you got it in white, I'll pay for it, but I want $1,000 off." Right? The customer's already. That's what they really want. They're just negotiating, right? They've started the
Yeah.
negotiating process. Knowing your market research all up front, when you go in, if you price that car accordingly, they don't even try not in this, hey, you don't want it, you don't want it. Then usually the customer caves and they would pay $1,000 extra, right? It really just talks about segmenting your teams, selling accordingly, and I think this is where selling incentives really come into place. This might be a little more progressive, and we'll get into it more later. Too many companies segment their customers on like a traditional SMB, mid market, and enterprise. The
Yeah.
willingness to pay in each of those categories can
It's
vastly
different.
differ, right? Just because somebody
Absolutely.
has a lot of money and they're bigger doesn't mean they'll pay a lot. Just because somebody's small and they seem not sophisticated, for lack of a better word, they might be willing to pay a whole lot because it's super intricate to their business. It's a piece that's going to tie everything together, whatever it may be, right? And they might pay 2x what the enterprise customer is, right? Doing your market research, finding out what people are willing to pay, segmenting those customers accordingly will help you set up your sales team to target those customers and get the maximum price from each of those. It becomes much easier to price at the end of the day for each of them as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So, willingness to pay kind of also touches upon the value-based pricing bit of
Mm-hmm.
it. While we spoke of value-based pricing, and there is this huge research happening out there, or that has already happened, and people are working on identifying various ways of value-based pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Value is still very subjective.
Yes.
As a buyer, I may look into a specific solution and I may find value in a different offering of that solution.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, as a seller, for the same solution, I may be looking at a different, looking at it from a different perspective in terms of value.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I think willingness to pay, with this amount of research that one has to put into it, asking the right questions as you spoke about,
Mm-hmm.
knowing more about the customer, understanding what he exactly needs or what she exactly needs, kind of also eventually trickles down to being a value based pricing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that there is no thumb rule to value based pricing. It is more about doing a lot of research, understanding what is that part of my solution that the customer is looking for, and it's something that he is willing to pay for,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of clinging on to it and working around that offering, and then coming up with your pricing. Having said that,
Mm-hmm.
we have covered a few models on pricing strategies. Let's say, in terms of identifying the best pricing strategy for the success of a business, do you still recommend one of these, or is it more circumstantial? How would you go about this?
I think every business really should, in my opinion, right? Because again, this is a little bit subjective in nature. I think you should start with willingness to pay framework, right? Most
Okay.
purchases are made from feelings perspective. We are
Yeah.
not logical creatures. I know a lot of people say get the data, get all. That's really important. It does tell a bit
Mm.
of a story, but there are reasons why you might purchase something in the same manner, a different way. I mean, this as an example here. If your kid is sick, like really sick, needs to get to the hospital, and you're out of gas for whatever reason here, you're probably willing to pay whatever it
Yeah.
takes at the very nearest gas station to get to the hospital in a timely manner. Now, if you're going to visit your in-laws who you don't really like so much and you really hate kind of being around them, not to poo-poo the in-laws
Yeah.
here, right? But hey, you might spend an extra 5 to 10 minutes just looking for the cheapest gas station. You'll drive a little bit out of your way to kill some time, right? The
Yeah.
end goal was the same, right? I needed fuel, right? My willingness to
Exactly.
pay for the same product and service that I use is vastly different all of a sudden, right? I will pay whatever it takes in one situation, and the other one, I'll take my time to find the lowest costs because of various other reasons, right? So the feelings based approach is really something why I believe willingness to pay is optimal in that situation. People will pay
Hmm.
for different things in different scenarios, in different venues, right? If you buy it through something through a retail channel versus a wholesale channel versus partners, right? Like all those people, they have different relationships built up. Willingness to pay is the optimal framework for that perspective. But that being said, there are companies that find certain models that work for them. I think ones that will never work are pegged to a competitor, and
Yeah.
kind of the feels good pricing. But value based, to me, value based is maybe the secondary layer to willingness to
Hmm.
pay, right? Okay,
Realistic.
this is what I'm willing to pay. Value
Yeah.
is now how I'm going to justify it to somebody, right? Well, if I buy this, I'm going to get 3x the return here, right? Or I'm not going to have to hire 10 people, I only have to hire 8 people,
Hmm.
right? There are ways that's now the logical discussion has started a little bit, or it
Absolutely.
maybe
Yeah.
the word is rationalization to yourself because again it's feelings based, but that's where the value can come in, right? How can you start quantifying these things around the edges? But that's why I believe willingness to pay is the best. If you are more of a commodity service, freemium styles are usually pretty good. Think incentive compensation management software, right? I believe there's got to be 20, 25, 30 companies out there today, right,
Hmm. Hmm.
who all probably offer, I will say 75% the same product or service, right? There's different bells and whistles around the edges. How do you sell those bells and whistles? Then what type of support services do you use, right? Are there kind of third party tech support that you can use that service you, that you don't have to do this yourself, right? If you're more well known
Hmm. Hmm.
as a bigger firm, they probably have access to that. If you're a smaller startup firm, you don't have that knowledge just yet, right? There's different ways to approach it, but hey, try our service for free or a very, very low price. If you want to kind of get our premium service, this is what it costs, right? And this might be a little too much pricing research, but usually want to present your pricing in three different ways, right? Kind of your high, middle, and low. I see too
Yeah.
many firms, mostly on like the B2C side, go low, middle, high, right? The middle one is usually what people pick anyways, but
Yes.
we, at least in English, read left to right. So the instant you look at that first price, you've pegged your value to that, right? Because you have no other framework or context. Oh, you're going to give this away for $9 a month.
Right.
And the middle one is $29 a month, and the super premium is $89 a month. Like, ugh, like, I have no way I want to pay that.
Sure.
You actually want to start in reverse. put the $89 one first, like, hey, I'm actually getting $89 product for $29 or $9.90.
Yeah.
I'm just willing to give up X, Y, or Z, right? That is a much stronger approach versus the other way around, just because of how we read, right? It's something we don't necessarily
Yes,
think
exactly.
about.
Yeah.
Present your best option first. That's what people will peg your value to at the end of the day.
Yeah, it kind of ties with your feel good factor.
Mm-hmm.
When you're seeing a higher price, when you read it for the first time, and then you see the next one is lower, you're feeling that, okay, the way you said,
Mm-hmm.
a product worth 89 is now available at 29 or 19. So that kind of plays with the human psychology. A question though over here, when with all of these examples, we're speaking more from the buyer's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at an organization that has more stakeholders involved when it comes to uh, pricing as well as selling.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean here is, uh, you may have a salesperson whose focus is only on selling, whereas he's not involved in pricing the product.
Mm-hmm.
In mature organizations, you have got deal desk, you have got pricing teams working closely with the product teams or the services teams. In such case, there is a high possibility that there can be a misalignment.
Mm-hmm.
A seller is always going to look at, as we discussed up until now, what is that the client is willing to pay.
Mm-hmm.
It may not necessarily be what the person who has actually priced it may be comfortable with. So there can be this misalignment
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to sales versus pricing. If you could throw a bit more light on this, it would be really great.
Yeah, so this is what I generally like to tell people. Sales process doesn't begin until a price is thrown out, right? Otherwise, you're kind of just
Yes,
sharing
exactly.
information with each other, like, oh, should we do this? What are your thoughts here? If you're throwing out a price, somebody's trying to buy in this situation.
Yes.
So that's when the process begins. I think the challenge is really internally, kind of going to what model to use. I think they struggle, right? How to even price this? What's the pricing research we should be doing up front? From a sales perspective, something I hope the world moves towards and is a little bit more progressive on. There's the traditional sales channel funnel, right? Like, how do you move the customer from top of funnel to bottom of funnel? What are
Exactly.
the motions that you have to do to get them to progress along the way? In an ideal world, I think, you would be defending pricing at each step of the way, right? When you have your lead generation specialist reaching out, maybe just to set up a meeting, if pricing ever comes up, they know how to defend pricing within that section of kind of the sales process, right? They don't need to know everything end to end. Again, they're lead gen people, but they should know how to, if it comes up, right? As they move along, how do you defend pricing each step of the way? So there's
Yeah.
no surprise at the end, oh, we lost the deal because of price, right? Or alternatively, right, your deal desk or pricing team, you get towards the end, they say, okay, here's the price. It's really never been brought up, so you're already surprising somebody. But if you are, and it's a vastly different number than you thought it was going to be, the sales rep tries to take the matter into their own hands and do the Price is Right strategy. Right? Oh, our service is really $10,000, but I think we can get it to you for $7,000. And then they go back to the deal desk or pricing team and say, well, we can get this for $7,000.
Mm.
Sometimes the sales rep just throws out a lower price without even, they negotiate against themselves, right? Before the other person even decides if this is a good price or not at $10,000. But there's now a contentious internal fight. Usually there are a lot of good processes set up in place, but once you get to this point, yeah, it kind of all goes out the window, right? A VP of sales
Yes.
steps in and says, oh, this is a key customer. We really got to win the account because the long term, it's good for the company. Your pricing team's like, no, we did this accordingly, right? We got good pricing research. And since that hasn't been shared with the broader organization, the sales rep doesn't believe them in that situation, says, no, we're gonna go get this deal at 7. A VP of sales or CFO or somebody comes in and okay, try to close this deal at 7. They end up closing the deal, which is great. Sales rep gets credited at $7,000, right? They'll get paid whatever the comp plan
Yes.
looks like at $7,000. The manager is happy because his or her direct report closes a deal. They
Close
also
the
get
deal.
credit and get paid for. Now nobody knows for sure, could they have gotten $10,000 on this deal, right?
Yes.
Because just weak pricing strategies. Alternatively, could this customer have paid $12,000 to $15,000, right? Again, how do you segment? what are they actually willing to pay? Who is your buyer? Are they a man or a woman? Are they in finance or IT? Like, what is their role? There are a lot of things you can do to segment customers. Again, maybe this person would have paid 15. Maybe this person would have paid 5 and you actually got 7. Like, we just don't know based on the research, right?
Yes.
So that's the biggest struggle, I think. There's a misalignment and a mistrust between the pricing teams and the sales teams. And
The sales
too
team. Yeah.
often, the sales teams then take, I'll just say, they kind of go commando and do their own thing to try and get the price so they can get closer to their quota. There are pricing teams that are comped accordingly with certain incentives, sometimes with
Yeah.
certain margins or certain pricing structures you have to achieve to kind of get your bonus. But when exceptions are put out, all of a sudden those aren't counted anymore because no, the
Yeah.
sales team gave an override, or our head of sales says no, we had to do this here. Right? There are so many areas for this to fall through. And did you get the maximum price you could in the situation? And most companies don't know because their pricing research isn't good, and they only celebrate the victories. There's the cost of the opportunity that is unknown, right? I think that is the biggest factor that companies leave in aggregate billions and billions and billions of dollars on the table because people would probably be willing to pay a little bit more if they understood the value that they were going to receive from your product or service.
So, there's this one thing that I have experienced. When it comes to selling, sellers always have this one statement that is always ready for the pricing team. They always throw this statement: "You just don't know what it takes to get through the door." Using this as like a kind of a leverage, they try and enter the organization with a price that they feel that the client is willing to pay,
Mm-hmm.
which eventually leads to what you just spoke about: the cost of lost opportunity or the revenue that is left on the table. Other thing that I have noticed is this is not a good strategy when you have misalignment between your sales team and pricing team, and the sales team drives the entire process and sells at a price that is much lower or potentially less than what the client would have paid. It hurts you big time. How? Let's say you are dealing with an enterprise. Now, when we speak of enterprises, these organizations usually have multiple businesses or sister concerns. Once you enter one organization with a specific price,
Mm-hmm.
you are stuck with that price forever for all the other organizations. So you're not only losing potential revenue with that one deal,
Mm-hmm.
if you actually end up being uh, a good vendor, or if your product is really good, rest of the organizations in the overall conglomerate, they are going to come at you, they're going to reach out to you, and they are eventually going to sign you up for the same amount that you sold it for
Mm-hmm.
to the other organization. So that is where your losses are multifold.
Yeah, so this is kind of where it's kind of twofold, right? This is where if you have multiple options, and how do we'll probably go into this a little bit later, but if you present 3 options, most people pick the one in the middle, right? So you can always figure out how to upsell them a little bit later,
Upside.
right? You kind of get them in the door, and this seems to work, right? You don't want to just sell everything all at once, and then like you got no more, gun in your powder or a powder in your gun. I said that backwards. I apologize. Then there's just nothing left, and then at the end of the day, it's annual renewals or multi-year contracts even come up. How do you increase pricing? This is something a lot of businesses really struggle with, right? Well, I sold at this,
Yes.
and I haven't changed my pricing for 6 or 7 years. If my pricing goes up even 3%, I'm going to lose all my customers, right? Like, whoa, that's a massive overreaction right away. But when each time for renewals comes up, whether it's through your sales team or your kind of customer success, customer support teams that oversee certain accounts, let them know, hey, our pricing's going up year over year. You give them enough runway. Generally, call it 3 months seems to be optimal, but there's probably some wiggle room depending on the product or service. Hey, it's going up, and here's why. The
Hmm.
worst reason is inflation. Like, that just irritates people. We do live in a
Yes.
world where inflation is a real thing, but we don't really know why. Like, all these industries, there's the basic supply and demand, but that's all people seem to understand. So once you get the next layer down, they're just confused. So don't say inflation, right? Have a real message behind it. Hey, to give you the continued service that you deserve, right? We needed to invest in X number of employees. Now, it doesn't even have to service these accounts, right? It could be somebody in HR, right? Just to better support the team, right? That has no impact on this customer, at least in a direct manner. But hey, we're going to grow our business or our headcount by 5% because we want to keep giving you the best service that you can possibly give or possibly receive. So hey, our prices are going to go up 6%. Okay,
Yes.
like there's a number where like, hey, you're
You
jumping
justify. Yes.
15%. Oh yeah, that's a little steep. Like what's going on here? But if you just do it slowly over the course of time, right? 5%, 6%, 4%, 6%, right? That adds up, and hardly anybody is going to notice at the end of the day, right? That's just people know again because inflation that yes, it's going to go up. But if you also deliver that with a message, you'll be okay. So
Yes.
constantly adjust your pricing, keep doing that, willingness to pay research. Like if the willingness to pay is actually dropping over time, holding pricing steady is actually a great thing. If you're in an ultra commodified space, holding price steady can actually be a good strategy at the end of the day. But it just depends what the market research says, what the data suggests. But generally speaking, always try to communicate a value when you're increasing your pricing at the end of a contract life cycle. That's where your sales rep, this is probably the easiest selling piece they'll have, right? Like they already bought the service, they should already like it. If they don't like the product or service, that's a different discussion. But if it's just, hey, status quo or better, hey, here it's going up because X, Y, and Z, right? I'm still here to service you. Our team is here to support you, right? This is a partnership, right? Like that type of messaging goes a long ways.
So, as a seller, these are some really good inputs that a seller can learn from. However, what are the other things that an organization should do? And I'm coming more from the perspective of incentivizing salespeople to
Yes.
pick the right options
Mm-hmm.
that you spoke about. You gave like multiple examples right now, and uh, all of those hold significant value based on the circumstance, the product that you're selling, the buyer,
Mm.
and the value that you see in the buyer, etc. But for a salesperson to pick the best option out there, truly the best option out there, how do you think organizations should link incentives
So
with their
yeah,
contract?
so paying on revenue is totally fine. Totally fine at the end. It's
Yes.
actually very easy. It's usually the metric that's most easily tracked and quantifiable at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. So it's not bad per se, and I'll still leave that's probably the dominant reason or dominant option out there. But to kind of give alternatives on that front, you can do margin
Mm.
based pricing, right? Hey, this deal based on all the economics is expected to produce 80% margin for the gross margin,
Mm.
80% gross
Yeah.
margin, 40%, whatever the number is, right? If you dip below whatever the threshold has been determined internally, you're not going to get full commission. Maybe it's 75% commission or 50% commission. You could still maybe even give full credit, full quota retirement credit, but you don't give the full pay, right? Because there are different
Yeah.
things that can come into play that, hey, maybe this really is worth a strategic investment by this company. Maybe this is a potential future partnership for us. So we really want to win
Yeah.
this deal and see where it can go long term. But you can't pay tooth and nail for something that's strategic and you're cutting your pricing for, right? And when you cut the pricing and you pay full rates, well, that costs you even more in that situation, right? So doing a margin-based approach is very strong. A lot of industries already do this.
Yes.
There's value-based incentives. Ones that are actually most relative are probably like healthcare, right? Hey, we want a certain outcome from our patient population here, right? If 95% of our patients heal from some traumatic event, whether it's acute in nature or kind of a long-term disease. We want to see an expected outcome of X, right? If you hit these thresholds, we'll give you the incentives. So now that's more for doctors and salespeople, but there are incentives that you can do from a value perspective, right? Did you truly, this is value-based pricing, right? Did you deliver value in these situations, right? What are your net promoter scores? Even though
Yeah.
I personally don't think those are great, right? But there are quantifiable metrics based on customer feedback that you can get based on all sorts of research that you can say, okay, we quantified this, they hit these metrics, right? Revenue might be plus
Mm.
or minus our threshold here, but the sales team did what they needed to do, so we will give them incentives, right? I think there's a debate in my world of should we pay based on outcomes, revenue or gross margin, or should we pay based on inputs, right? Value is a little bit
Yeah.
more on inputs in these situations, right? Did the sales team do all the right things with their resources that they had at hand to optimize our outcomes? If they did, right,
Mm.
they should be rewarded accordingly. And then the last one's generally just on kind of like customer lifetime value. incentives. Bigger deals for longer contracts. Um,
Yes.
you can always give greater incentives to lock somebody in for longer periods of time. Most common is usually um, kind of, maybe it's going the way of the dinosaur now, but the old cable deals that the sports leagues would run with, like an
Hmm.
ESPN, CBS, NBC. Hey, lock in 10 years with us, right, and give us this many billions of dollars, and we'll take care of everything from there, right? There's so much more value in doing that for a long period of time than there is for short, hey, we're going to have to renew this in 6 months or a year, right? Like, we're going to have these discussions again. Like, again, to my last point on pricing increases, most people aren't very good at that, right? They should be doing it one way, but
Hmm.
they get nervous, or things go by the wayside. It's something that people just forget about, right? So now they have to have these every 6 months or every year. Hey, price go up, here's, and you got to resell a little bit because they just haven't done a good job on that front, right? Locking in longer periods. One, it's kind of a hedge against kind of how market fluctuations might happen in your business, but allows you to optimize your business for that time period. So when the contract does end, you got a whole new structure in place. You got whole new products and services, right? You can amplify your business from that perspective. That's kind of a way I would like to see it done, right? So kind of customer lifetime value incentives can really play a positive role in these situations.
Yeah, I've also seen other options like organizations who have got multiple offerings,
Mm-hmm.
multiple products. They may bundle or unbundle the set of products.
Mm-hmm.
They may modularize their one product into multiple modules so that the seller can actually sell one part of the solution, or he can sell the entire solution and also additionally bundle a part of another solution.
Mm-hmm.
This is an example. Other things that I've seen are like cross sell, upsell, are like things that we have been seeing for some time now. Any other things, any other ideas that you may want to contribute when it comes to what organizations should do, especially when it comes to what we spoke about earlier, that there
Yeah.
is this misalignment,
Yeah.
right, when it comes to sales and pricing. How can organizations handle this misalignment? Any ways that they can play a role there?
Yeah, I really do want to touch on the bundling piece that you just spoke about because it's really good. A
Yeah.
great example is, I got an iPhone here.
Yeah.
I think a few years ago, Apple started unbundling their
Hmm.
charger from their phone. Like, hey,
Hmm.
you just bought this thing;
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
should all come together. Now it doesn't, and people were willing to pay for it. Now, who would have thought that, right? Like, you sold me a phone and you're not going to give me a charger. You would think, in theory, hey, that's really going to irritate the customers, right? How are they going to charge their phone? But Apple decided, you know what? Our customers, based on our research, at least I hope they're doing the research, and it's not just they
Will
got
be.
lucky here. They're actually willing to pay for our chargers, our Lightning chargers here. And I think I saw some. This isn't my analysis, but I think I saw somebody kind of do a reduction analysis and come to a conclusion that Apple adds about $4 billion of revenue to their bottom line from chargers, right? Like, that is
Insane.
for something everybody was giving away, and just second
For
nature. Like,
free.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course the phones need power, right? Like, how are they going to work without power? But Apple unbundled that product, and now people pay essentially twice, right? They pay for their phone once, they pay for the charger second. It's
For the
obviously
charger.
small.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only so much. I justify it to myself. Oh, it's only $5 or $10, right? I'll use it every day. Like, again, justification, rationalization. We pay for it, right? $4 billion,
Yes.
right, to Apple's top line, which I would say the margins on these little chargers, very, very high, right? So almost all that probably falls to the bottom line, right? So how do you bundle your product or service is a huge way to differentiate your product or service through the selling motion. But you
Yeah.
talked on cross-selling and upselling. I think those are pretty straightforward. You can, in a comp plan itself, you can have accelerators or decelerators based on pricing
Decent. Yeah.
structures.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, if you get, we think you can get $10,000 for this service. If you can sell it for 12, I'll give you an extra accelerator on top of it, right? Because you just brought in, to call it $2,000 of almost pure profit here, right? Like, there's nothing that needed to have. You just said you can get $2,000 more than I thought we could get based on all of our research, right? And now this also helps your pricing team in the future, right? They can kind of get sharp with their pricing, but because they gave you good information on top of getting more money, right? Like, you can give an accelerator. Alternately, kind of to what I said earlier, right? Decelerators if you're not doing the right thing, right? If you're kind of, shortchanging your team a bit, right? A good example I like to use is somebody might be at, let's call it 100% of quota on the dot, but they discount their service at least based on the pricing team's perspective by 15, 20, 50% in some situations, and another seller is at 80% of quota, not going to earn any accelerators, might be borderline performance managed out of the
Yes.
organization, just depending on how they manage against quota, but they get 100 plus or greater percent of the pricing that the pricing team offers out, right? Like, who is better in
Yes.
this situation, right? The person that 100% that's given 50% discounts, or the person at
Okay.
80% of their quota that gets the full boat, right? Like, that is a huge, huge, huge difference that a lot of companies
Absolutely.
don't evaluate. Um, so I guess that kind of goes hand in hand with markups, right? If the sales reps can mark up things beyond the initial price or
Yes.
gross margin, right? You can kind of give them additional incentives. And then really just the team structure, kind of going back to how I discussed companies do SMB, mid market, enterprise segmenting. Segment based on willingness to pay, right? The customers who are the easiest to sell to, or maybe let me rephrase, the customers who are not willing to pay the highest amount, well, you don't put your best sellers there. Like, you actually want kind of your up and coming entry level sales reps to be working these accounts that they really have to learn how to sell a bit here, right? The ones that are far more strategic in nature, that are willing to pay far more, that's where you want your more senior reps who are experienced, who speak the language of the industry, of the people that they're selling to. It becomes easier to sell at the end of the day, right? This is the unmeritocratic meritocracy of sales, right? Well, that seems unfair. You want your best team closing the highest dollar deals, right? You want your
Yes.
best reps on those deals. You don't want your weakest reps on those deals just because of where they happen to fall based on arbitrary seat segmentation, right? Like, that's not a good way to move your business forward, right? So setting up your org structure so you can then
Right.
comp accordingly based on the difficulty of selling within that specific segment or cohort, then you reward them accordingly, right? Based on how easy or hard it may be.
Fantastic. Now, the last part as I spoke about earlier, while we have covered a lot about pricing and how you can link them with incentives, I would still love to get your views on how do organizations work on the misalignment between the pricing and sales teams.
Sure. So
Because that is where I believe a lot of uh, kind of issues stem out from, and eventually it hurts the organization big time. So, what are different ways an organization should work on sorting out these misalignments?
for sure. So I think the number one thing outside of pricing research to get your pricing in line, it's how do you manage internally is really your question, right? I think the
Yes,
number one
yes,
thing is really to foster empathy, right? Like, pricing team knows that the sales team is really the ones out there negotiating the deals, right? They need to sit through those sales calls to understand, hey, these are the customers they're encountering. This is the challenges. The reason a lot of sales reps discount is generally because they hear day in and day out their product sucks, the competitors are better, right? Like, there's so many reasons that this is what the buyers are doing as a negotiating strategy, whether they're right or wrong. Perception is reality here, but that's all the sales reps hear is negative feedback. So when the
yes.
pricing team is aware, okay, they're getting beat down on all these fronts,
Oh,
uh, the marketing team needs to step in, right? Like, what does your branding look like? What does the messaging on your website look like, right? When you have the pricing strategy, everybody actually knows what to do, right? We want to be top of market, or we're trying to be middle market here because that's just our customer segment, or we're the lower end. We sell the cheapest product or service, but we deliver other guarantees. Whatever it is, when people are aligned on the strategy across the org, becomes easier to get aligned, right? So when people are empathetic to the roles that each individuals play within their org, it's a recipe for success. Um, the number two thing is it just makes it easier to communicate. Clarity is an optimal situation. You got clear policies, your pricing guidance is strong, your branding is very good, your marketing messaging is on point. There's a lot of things that align that make it just easier to function as an organization, right? Compensation is rock solid. The approval process is very simple and easy to understand. There's actually very
yeah.
few overrides when you get it right. It just becomes, hey, defend pricing at each step of the way, right? So just being communicative and just being clear on your strategy and what it needs, what success looks like from end to end. And then the last part is really just identifying the champions. I think this is both internally and externally, right? Who's going to help you sell something better, right? This is life is a
Yes.
negotiation. I know we want to believe we can be DEI friendly, or we can be ultra meritocratic and like kill what you eat. Like life is far messier than that. Knowing who can do what for you is a big thing, especially in the sales process. Seller reaches out to somebody, again, your product or service is 10 grand. Who you reach that first time might be willing to pay more or less than $10,000. Finding the right people to be your champion that are suitable for representing you first and foremost, but also do have that willingness to pay factor. They can justify it to themselves and to others why they're willing to pay what they're willing to pay. Same goes internally, right? When I want to do a new comp plan design for any organization, right? I have to sell it to a whole bunch of people. Oh, this seems like it's going to cost a lot here, right? I don't know that we can afford this. You just start justifying things around the edges. Or, oh yeah, this plan is really good. Here's how we would deliver the messaging from it, right? Here's what the communication looks like to the ICs, the individual contributors. Here's what the management messaging looks like. Here's what the CEO's messaging looks like. Here's the CEO's comp plan. Here's the salesperson's comp plan. They're perfectly aligned, right? So we expect similar outcomes from the company strategy here. Having all that laid out in front of you is a complete recipe for success.
Brilliant. Ryan, thanks a lot. A lot to learn from this call, from this discussion. I'll just quickly summarize for all the audience we are going to have listen to this podcast. So when it comes to pricing, first thing is that there is no specific way of pricing a product. There are multiple strategies out there. A lot of them have been proven, but then the circumstances back then were different. Today we are living in a different world, more fluid, more dynamic. That is where, as an organization, if you are starting up, as an organization, let's say you are established but you are launching a new product, or let's say you are an organization who have been around for some time with a mature product. So three different scenarios, all of them demand or mandate a different way of pricing the product. Willingness to pay is one of the most preferred way of pricing. However, it involves a lot of research, uncovering the value proposition that the buyer sees into your offering. That is how one should approach this. The next part is, while we speak about pricing and pricing methodologies, there have been a lot of instances that I have personally seen wherein, and I've been a part of, wherein pricing is different than sales. Everyone is aware of it, but then there is always a misalignment. And this misalignment is eventually what leads to a disaster. Organizations need to focus on kind of working out and ironing out these alignments, these misalignments. And the last part is to ensure that you are linking incentives with your comp plan for salespeople, so that they ensure that they pick the best way of pricing the product for the organization and making the maximum out of the deal. Ryan, thanks a lot. It was nice interacting with you. I am pretty sure everyone who's going to listen to this podcast is going to learn a lot out of it. I look forward to meeting you again with different topics. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.